So I've been watching Game of Thrones. A lot of people have asked me what I think about this show over the past few years. A lot of people. And I never had anything to say because I wasn't watching the show. My wife loved it. Some of my best friends loved it. And they would constantly try to get me to watch the show. And I was like, I'll eventually do it. So I took the beginning of 2019 and I binged the show. And I watched the entire show in a few weeks, actually, leading up to season 8. And I was able to experience all of that in a very quick time, so that I could talk about the series finale and my overall thoughts on the show, which I'm about to do in just a second. But before I get farther in the review, I do want to give a thank you to the sponsor for this episode, and that is Raid Shadow Legends, a brand new RPG for smartphones released in 2019. It's extremely immersive and one of the most ambitious games you're going to find on the smartphone. It can be compared with some of the biggest PC and console titles, and since we're going to be talking about a dragon very soon here in just a second, check out this dragon the game features. It has all the features you'd expect from a brand new RPG title, amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of champions to collect and customize. I downloaded the game, I played it, I had a good time. It reminded me of some of the old-fashioned RPGs I've always liked, and surprisingly the game is completely free, which is awesome considering the level of detail the game has. Raid's special launch tournament is happening right now and it's getting big real fast, so go to the description of this video, download Raid only through my link to get 50,000 silver immediately, and here's the coolest part. You'll be entered into a special launch tournament to compete with other players for in-game prizes or physical prize packs. So please do check out the links for iOS and Android in the description below. Thank you so much to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Let's talk about that Game of Thrones series finale, because I have a lot to say. So my wife, my friends, and many of you have been imploring me to watch this show for the past 7 to 8 years. People have been begging me to see this show, and I've always put it off because I have this thing with TV shows. I'm afraid to get invested in a show, love it so much, and then either it gets canceled or it ends poorly, and I feel like I've wasted my time. So with Breaking Bad, I binged the entire show when it was in its final season, and I loved it. I loved the finale. I loved how it wrapped up. In my opinion, Breaking Bad is a perfect show. It rarely had a misstep. It possibly didn't have a misstep. Breaking Bad was incredible, and that show is very rare. There are so many shows where I have gotten invested in them and they've either ended in a horrible way or they got canceled, and I got burned a lot with shows. And so I kind of became of this mentality where unless I have it streaming or easy access to it, or I'm really interested in seeing the show, which does happen, I tend to not watch TV shows until they've had a fairly successful run and I'm like, okay, so they had a long time to prove how good they were so that I could watch that show and then get really invested in it. And that's what I did with Game of Thrones, because I heard nothing but good things about Game of Thrones for at least season 1 through 7, I would say. I've heard plenty of things about season 7 and 6 and 5 and people not liking everything that happens, but for the most part, people seem to be pleased with seasons 1 through 7. For the most part, consensus-wise. And so I was like, you know what? All right, season 8 is starting. It's the final one. I'm going to watch the whole show. And I binged 7 seasons in about 2.5 weeks. So that was an emotional journey that took me in many places. And I felt very depressed on some days and very happy on some days and then very excited. And but it was a different thing for me because so many people have spent years with this show. And I was able to experience it condensed. I was able to feel the arcs that they were setting up in a very quick period of time. I didn't have to remember, what happened 6 years ago? No, that was a couple days ago. So watching and discussing season 8 with my wife and my friends has been a magnificent experience for me, because I have been completely on the outside of the Game of Thrones event for all these years. And so most people have these grand built-up expectations about what they wanted to see. I didn't, because I watched the whole show in a few weeks, and I really enjoyed it. It's a masterful show. I mean, incredibly well directed and written and acted, and geez, the fucking visuals and the cinematography, God, I mean, there's very few shows that have ever gotten close to that level of craftsmanship on TV. My favorite episode still to this day is Battle of the Bastards. I love that episode. It's my favorite battle. I love the finale. I guess let's just give the spoiler warning up front here. We're going to talk full spoilers about all of Game of Thrones, including the last episode. So if you haven't seen any of that, that's your warning. Love the ending of Battle of the Bastards, Ramsay getting mauled by those dogs and Sansa just walking off. But setting battle episodes aside, my favorite dramatic moment was the entire finale of The Laws of Gods and Men. Tyrion finally standing up to his father when he was on trial, admitting to the things he feels, confessing to the things that he's afraid of, and standing up for himself was just... I got goosebumps when I watched that episode, and I thought that Peter Dinklage throughout this entire show was just masterful. He's my favorite character, Tyrion is, for sure. At least seasons 1 through like 6-ish. He makes some really strange choices for the last few seasons, and they kind of did away with the whole Tyrion is clever and smart and amazing thing, which sucks, but... Nevertheless, he remained my favorite character. And surprisingly, I was able to, for the most part, avoid spoilers for Game of Thrones somehow. I knew that Ned Stark died. It's pretty hard to avoid that. And I knew that a lot of people died at the Red Wedding, but I didn't know who. And so I had expectations for that, but I didn't know, like, what would happen. But for the most part, I didn't really know anything else. So I was able to have a very fresh experience with the show. And I enjoyed almost all of it. Season 8, though, has been a mixed bag for me, which we're going to start talking about now. There's a lot of things that have happened in this season that fans hate, and choices that were made that fans hate. And there's, of course, been petitions and boycotts and all kinds of crazy nonsense on the internet, as usual, whenever fans don't like the way something they love is going. And I was fine with the first 3 episodes of Season 8. The Long Night looked awful on streaming. It's going to look amazing on Blu-ray, and I'm excited to see that episode on Blu-ray. But my biggest issue with Season 8, even though I liked the first 3 episodes, before I saw the 4th episode, was that it just felt rushed. It felt like so much was happening so quickly, and while I could understand certain choices that were being made, it just felt so crammed. And that could have something to do with the fact that most of the seasons, except for 7, had 10 episodes. So a lot was happening really fast, and arcs were just flying all over the place. The Night King was like an afterthought, really. And from the perspective of someone who watched the whole show in 2.5 weeks, though, he's kind of an afterthought throughout the entire show. They never really knew what to do with him. I remember, I forget if it was season 3 or season 4, I don't remember. One of the seasons ended with the White Walkers just marching, and you were like, oh shit, what's happening? And then I, of course, click next episode, and I watched like an entire half of the next season before a White Walker or the Night King even showed up. Like the final season before that teases them, and then they barely show up. And then Hard Home happened, which was incredible. But for the most part, the show just didn't really know what to do with the Night King or the White Walkers. They were just sort of like these background antagonists of an undead army that will create some cool battle scenes. And so I wasn't surprised that his death was also an afterthought, and it kind of came and went. One of my biggest issues with Season 8, before we get to the finale, because I got things to say. I've never talked about Game of Thrones even once on this channel, so I apologize if you're a new viewer and you're waiting for me to talk about the finale, but I've never discussed Game of Thrones on this channel, and I have a few things to say. One of my biggest concerns with the show is what they did with Arya in, I believe it was Season 6. By the way, Arya is competition with Tyrion for my favorite character. I love her. She might be my favorite character, but Tyrion is just so fucking awesome. But they take her and do this training with her in Season 6. She learns how to be someone of many faces, and she can, imitate people, and she steals their faces, and she's basically Ethan Hunt. So that's fucking cool. What are they going to do with that? Well, she does some stuff. She kills everybody responsible for the Red Wedding. That's great. Revenge. And then throughout all of Season 8, she never uses this ability. Like at the end of The Long Night, the Night King is approaching Bran in the wheelchair. And I was positive that Arya was just going to gut him right there and take off Bran's face, and it would have been Arya in this moment, revealing that she would have had to, I guess, killed Bran and taken his face, and that Bran would have made that sacrifice because that's what the three-eyed raven thought he was supposed to do, or that's why he was kept alive throughout this whole show. And I don't know. It just would have been a really fucked up and unexpected way instead of her like jumping out of the shadows. And it would have given Bran more of a reason to be in the show all this time, because now I'll say this, my least favorite character in the entire show is Bran. I do not like this character, what they did with him. He spent an entire season underground grasping a tree limb and becoming the Three-Eyed Raven, and I just don't like that character. I find him very boring whenever they cut back to him. Even before that, I was like, okay, it's whatever. There's been two moments with Bran that I thought brought out something, and that was Holdor's big moment. And then when Jaime sees him in season 8, and you get this look on Jaime like, oh shit, there's the kid that I did this to. But then you don't really even get that because Bran is like, I'm not Bran, I'm the Three-Eyed Raven. And so it just feels so forced and strange. And I would have loved if that could have been another way that Arya could have used her abilities, because she doesn't use these abilities at all throughout this season. This incredible gift she has, and she never fucking uses it. It makes it feel like all of her training was just this waste. I'm not going to get too much into the prophecies that were foretold throughout this show. Some of them came true, others seem to have just been forgotten about. I'm not going to concern myself with that, because as soon as they were making prophecies in the first few seasons, I was like, oh, this is not a good idea. You're just not going to want to do all of this stuff. I know you're not. And of course, some of them didn't really work out. And there's stuff that's in the novels that was never in the show as well, prophecy-wise, because I actually have started to read the book, and it's good. George R.R. Martin is a genius. That being said, there's just a lot that they did in those first 3 episodes that felt very rushed. Then we get to the last of the Starks, and things start to get to a strange point for me. Didn't hate it yet, and I didn't loathe what I was seeing, but I could see that it was going in a direction that didn't feel earned yet. It didn't feel warranted yet. So when we get to the bells episode and Dany is up on that dragon and she hears the bells and the city has surrendered and everyone has laid down their swords and she has won. I mean, her dreams have come true and she decides, fuck all of you. I'm going to kill all of you in a horrible fire. Men, women, children, innocents. Everybody's just going to fucking die. So I can sit on the throne. Even though I just won the throne, I'm going to take the throne. And the excuse seemed to be, well, her father was the Mad King and now she's the Mad Queen. And so I'm like, all right, look, I don't like the way this is going. It feels rushed. It's not that I hate that she would make that choice. Okay, for people who like that choice, I'm fine with the choice. It's getting to it. It's the execution of getting there. It's the amount of time we have with these characters to understand what would lead her to make that choice. Because again, watch the whole show in 2 weeks. I remember all the people she burned, the people she punished, the people she nailed to signs, okay? I remember all of the fucked up shit she did, but those were all events that had a cause and effect. The cause was some horrible violence or threat of her being assaulted or killed, and the effect was her saying, nope, that's not going to happen because now I'm going to make things right. In the case of King's Landing, there was no cause. She was just pure effect. She just murdered and slaughtered 1 million people who didn't do anything to her. I get being pissed at Cersei. I get being pissed at the Lannister army. Okay. But the men, women, and children who were melted, there's no cause there. And so the getting to that moment, it just did not feel earned for me. And maybe 2 or 3 more episodes could have done that. So let's talk about the series finale. I got some of my buddies together, my wife, we sat down, we watched it tonight, and we were excited to see where it would go, but we were a little cautious, because like the season was a little mixed so far. And before the episode started, though, we had a discussion. We went out to eat, and we talked about who our least favorite character in the entire series was. And unanimously, everybody said Bran. So you can probably imagine what we went through about halfway through the series finale. When Tyrion looks at Bran and says, you have this great story, and you should be the king, the entire room erupted, okay? I wish I was recording it. Everyone erupted. And it was actually kind of hilarious, unfortunately, because I felt bad because my friends have been watching this show for like 8 years. I watched it for 2 weeks. So I didn't have this pent up, built up, insane expectations or desires. But I knew I didn't want it to be Bran. I was like, that's just stupid. And I didn't like what they were doing with Dany either, because she just seemed like this crazy person who just went nuts, and it didn't really work for me. I liked what they were doing with Jon Snow, and I thought potentially he could be a good person, a good candidate for the Iron Throne, or maybe Sansa, or even Arya. But I just, but Bran was just the one where I was like, that's not what I expected. And that's something I want to talk about. Yeah, I understand why Bran could be a good choice for the throne, because he's like this omnipresent person now, and he can see things that other people can't, and he'll probably make really wise decisions and everything. It's just that aspects of the writing now and the lead up to this just feels so messy. There was an episode in season 7 where Bran said something about how he could never be lord of anything. I get that he's not a lord now, he's a king, but a king is above a lord. So if he doesn't want to be a lord of anything, then how is he suddenly a king? Well, you could say to me, he doesn't actually want to be king, he's just the best person for the job. That's not true, because he says to Tyrion,
"Why do you think I came all this way?"
Meaning that he probably planned this all along. It's entirely possible that he told Jon of his true heritage, knowing that Jon would then tell Dany, that Dany would get pissed, kill everybody in King's Landing, and then Jon would kill Dany, and then Bran could be king. So he just kind of like sat around and waited for things to happen. I mean, that's kind of what he did throughout the entire show, actually. Yeah. I talked with my buddies about this. I actually think that Bran should have died in the pilot. When Jaime pushed him out of the window, I think that should have been it for him. I do not like the whole three-eyed raven thing. In fact, I kind of really hate it. It's my least favorite aspect of the entire show. And I found the character, just as a person, just boring. Just a very boring character that kept cutting back to and cutting back to. And I don't really feel like he brought much to this show. But he's like the arc of the whole show. He's the first big dramatic thing that happens in the end of the pilot, and now he's the king at the series finale. So my least favorite character is apparently the most important aspect of the whole show. That's great. Still, I'm level-headed about this show. I've had very little investment in it, just a few weeks. And so I've had no built-up thoughts or extreme wants, and I can't really be that mad, I'm just sort of like, wow, that was a really disappointing season for such a great show. And I can't imagine how people feel who've been investing so much time into this show over the past few years. But this right here is really the main reason that I don't watch that much TV. Because you can hear that a show is perfection for year after year after year. And if they don't stick the landing, it kind of makes things hard. And it makes rewatchability really bad too. I'm going to say this, though. This is not a horrible season. There's plenty of moments in this season that I liked. I loved Brienne getting knighted. Thought that was amazing. I actually cried. But then, of course, Jaime turns his back on her and is like, well, I hit it and I quit it. Bye, bitch. And he just leaves. I was like, what the fuck? Okay. Go back to Cersei. That's cool. I liked Tyrion with his tearful goodbye with his brother in this episode and when he was still alive. The cinematography, the visuals, the acting. My God, the score. This is like technical brilliance. Some of the best of that side of the production I've ever seen on TV. It's really just the writing. The characters just shifted a lot and said and did things that didn't make sense to me and made choices that I didn't understand what they were thinking. And I think a lot of this comes down to one of the biggest issues when you attempt taboos, the unexpected and the unpredictable and the extreme, which that's Game of Thrones. This show is filled with taboos. There's so many of them. And the show is very shocking throughout the entire runtime. There's constant extremes that the writers are forcing these characters to endure, which makes for great television. But then you have to wrap it up somehow. And this entire season is filled with more of those extremes and more of those unexpected, unpredictable moments. Yes, all of that is true, but it just doesn't work anymore because it doesn't fit in with the rest. All of the extremes, for the most part, save for a few elements of certain seasons, worked. There were just a few choices. I was like, okay, that's too far. I don't need that. We don't need that. There were just a few moments like that where I was like, I got the point already. You don't also have to do this to this character. Totally understand that. But in the case of this season, it felt like they were just like, hey, let's just do all this crazy shit and people will think it's amazing and nobody will be able to guess this. Maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean it works as a story. It doesn't mean that the characters have reached a logical conclusion. And again, I must stress, for those who like the way this season has gone, that's cool, totally. But it's not, for me, a case of don't like what the characters did. It's a case of too much happened too quick, not enough time to sell these choices. I'm fine with John killing Danny. I'm sort of okay with her making the choice to kill all those people if they can find a thematic reason for it to work. Would I have preferred her to just swarm King's Landing and burn down the Red Keep? Yeah. But again, if you like the way Season 8 went, I can get behind most choices. It's just that I think it should have had maybe 8 episodes, a couple more, to just really flesh out what's going on. Because there's so many things that just don't make sense. Like, the smartest character in the whole show is Tyrion. But he brings everybody into the crypt during the long night when the undead are coming. So he brings everybody to be safe in the place filled with dead people. Like, there's so many choices that just don't work for me like that. And it bugs me to have to say that, because a lot of the show I loved. And this is very much so, for me, a case of just not sticking the landing. But I have to give it to these writers and the directors and everybody on this crew and the actors for creating a groundbreaking show, genuinely, that for all of these years has been amazing. They created a great show and they did really great things with it, but the way they decided to end this really didn't work for me. Another thing about the series finale that bugged me is it was just so drawn out. There were so many scenes that just went and went, like they were trying to push the runtime. Tyrion slowly walking through the rubble. Jon slowly walking up the stairs. We got that great shot of the dragon wings behind Dany, but then there's more drawn out sequences of people talking in rooms, and then we get a sequence where Tyrion straightens the chairs. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is the finale of this epic show that people have been yelling at me to watch for the past 8 years. I didn't expect it to be like this. That's the highest level of disappointment that I can have, because I watched the whole show in a few weeks. And yeah, I don't like the way Season 8 went for the most part. It's a very mixed bag for me, as is this finale. But I can't be as disappointed or as angry as some fans are. And also, I'm just not that kind of guy. I'm always on the side of creators, because they're trying to create something, they're trying to put something out there, they're working on it, and they're hoping that people like it. But sometimes choices are made that are so short-sighted and so incomprehensible that I just can't support that. And a lot of Season 8 left me feeling that way. But still, overall as a show, it's a great show. And there's a lot to love in the show, but the finale it wasn't there for me. So yeah, I finally watched Game of Thrones. I will try to do some more TV show reviews in the future. It's just that I kind of like to wait until I can feel the show out, see how it's gone. Like, are people satisfied with, the majority of it? And then I'm like, okay, I can invest that much time into this thing. And then I feel excited about talking about it. If you guys did see the Game of Thrones series finale, which I hope you did, because I just spoiled the whole goddamn thing. What did you guys think of it? I'm curious to know, because I do feel like this is going to be very polarizing. The whole season has been polarizing, and so I really want to know what people think of this episode. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I look forward to more reviews very soon, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.